Looks like we're talking about Dan versus again. Who would have guessed? We've said this time and time again, and we're gonna say it once more, but Dan is one of the best jerk characters to ever exist in media, not even just TV. The people behind this show really understood how to make a jerk character work, because it so easily could have gone horribly wrong. So let me tell you why Dan from Dan Versus is the most lovable jerk there is. There are probably some exceptions, but I'm gonna ignore them for the sake of the video, so stop typing. First off, who is Dan and what does he do? Well, Dan is kind of a nobody who does nothing. He's got no job, no aspirations, and just kinda sits around getting mad at the world. And when he gets mad, he gets dangerous. And not only does he get dangerous, but he gets even. He does not let anything, no matter how small, ever slight him, because if something does, then it's war. More often than not, Dan will go to some unbelievably extreme and also sometimes unreasonable lengths to make sure that his honor is restored. He believes that a wolfman scratched his car? Well, he's gonna spend days upon days trying to learn everything he can about werewolves and tracking him down, only to end up keying his car in revenge. A Canadian show preempts his favorite ultra-violent cartoon? Well, he's off to destroy the country! To be fair, Canada did a lot to him prior, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so that's the one I'm gonna mention. His favorite burger joint gets his order wrong? Well, he's gonna chain himself to the front desk until the manager admits he got it wrong. That's the kind of guy Dan is. This guy would be right at home in the YouTube comments section, am I right? Dan doesn't really have a lot going on in life aside from revenge, so it makes sense that he puts all his energy into that. It doesn't help that for the most part, he's basically always alone. When you're by yourself a lot of the time, especially in a cramped, dark area like his downtown apartment, negative emotions tend to flare up. People tend to feel sadder or angrier. And a lot of people, such as Dan here, they don't really know how to process it and they end up finding some negative outlets to get it out. But Dan wasn't always like this. He used to be a pretty sweet, kinda timid kid, until one summer camp outing ruined it all. He had to stand up to some bullies, and now, technically speaking, he's become the bully. At least at first glance. See, Dan may not be able to control his anger, and it does lead him to do some terrible things and make some horrible threats, but a lot of the time, Dan's crazy theories turn out to be right. He thought Elise's parents were part of the mafia, and they were. He thought that New Mexico's hot air balloon festival was run by cultists, and he was right. And again, there's the Wolfman thing. No one believed him, but he turned out to be right. As Chris says in the George Washington episode, Dan's intelligence level is kind of interesting because he knows some really obscure information or he's really perceptive at the most outlandish of times, but there's some basic knowledge and information he just outright does not have. And also doesn't want. Dan has absolutely no desire to change. Why should he? He's always proven to be right. So clearly something's working for him, so why change his lifestyle? It's everybody else's fault for getting angry at him and slighting him. It doesn't matter what he does, like, oh, I don't know, kidnapping the commissioner of Major League Baseball or trying to blow up part of the city to get rid of traffic. He's the good guy. Chris says so, and no, that's definitely not because he told Chris to say that. So with all this said, it sounds like Dan should be the villain of the story, not the hero. Even if he does end up guessing correctly as to what's actually going on, why should that matter? Just because you're correct doesn't mean you're good. Insert your own political joke here. There are 3 reasons that I can pinpoint for Dan being as great of a character as he is. For one, Dan is relatable. A lot of the stuff he hates, they're things you and I hate, like traffic, or outdated technology, or the common cold. There's a few times where I have to disagree with him, like I love baseball and I'm a huge fan of New Mexico, as you can see here, and I'm not ashamed to say it. But aside from those minor cases, we want to see Dan go after these things because we ourselves want to do the same. At least in our imaginations, because if we did that in real life, we'd probably go to jail at best. Secondly, Dan is exaggerated. He's not just some bitter loser who goes, I hate this, and all I'm gonna do is whine about it for 22 minutes. That's not his style. He's a cartoon, he can kinda do whatever he wants. And the writers took advantage of that through all 3 seasons. His goofy and aloof attitude at the weirdest times also really helps him shine. Like when he paralyzes Chris, he just kinda treats Chris like he's still active and sort of uses him as a puppet. He doesn't do this to be a jerk or for some kind of power trip. He just does this because, well, he's a weirdo and this is his rationale for making things right. Whether it be in his eyes or in morality's eyes, it doesn't really matter. Dan's gonna do what Dan's gonna do. And the third and perhaps biggest reason is that Dan is human. Despite the fact that the show's all about some angry guy getting revenge on the world, Dan isn't always a white-hot fire of pure rage. He's got some real connections and friendships. Even though he puts Chris through all kinds of crap and takes his friendship for granted, it's clear that he still values the guy. As much as Dan talks trash or makes vague threats against Chris, he would never actually let him get hurt. They've come much too far and have been friends for far too long. Take, for example, the episode where Elise's parents come to visit at the last minute. Chris originally had plans with Dan to go see a horror movie, but naturally he had to cancel, and this upsets Dan a lot. This is actually the reason why he decides to take revenge on Elise's parents. Now, at first it would seem like he's mad because he's gonna miss the movie, but Chris outright offers him the chance to go alone and Dan refuses, saying it won't be as fun without him. Sure, he's kinda saying that it's more fun with a second person rather than Chris specifically, but he goes to great lengths to make sure that Chris spends time with him today and not Elise's parents. If he didn't care about Chris and just wanted anybody to watch the movie with, he could find anybody. Yeah, he may not have any friends, but who can resist a free movie ticket, right? If it was purely about the experience, he would have let Chris go, and then probably slap him sometime later for canceling on him. But no, it has to be Chris. It has to be his buddy. Though Chris isn't actually his best friend because that honor goes to his cat, Mr. Mumbles, who's actually a female. Huh. You think Dan would have checked, but to be fair, it's Dan, so kinda makes sense? Dan absolutely adores Mr. Mumbles and basically treats her like she's his own kid. He speaks in baby talk, he pampers her, he even throws her a birthday party with a fish-flavored cake. I guess everyone has a soft spot for some kind of animal, and for Dan, it's cats. Ever since he rescued her from that animal shelter that he later blew up, it was love at first sight. Speaking of love, there's also Hortense. Hortense is Dan's love interest for 2 episodes. It counts. Dan is always really smooth with her, and it's clear that he has legitimate feelings for her, even if he tries to deny it or cover them up. But Chris and Elise can see right through him because, come on, it's Dan. While the episode Dan vs. the Wedding is pretty divisive, I personally like it because we get to see a lot of emotional range and depth from Dan. For the first time ever, he's not trying to take something down because of anger. He's doing it because of jealousy and heartbreak. Something that Dan himself didn't realize he was capable of going through. It goes without saying that Dan's motivation here is mostly selfish. But when he figures out that Hortense's fiancé, Jeremiah Berger, has been married many times before and believes that she has no idea, he goes out of his way to let her know and shame Jeremiah Berger for lying to her, purely because it was the wrong thing to do and it could get her heart broken. That, and also he might be the rebound guy, but it didn't really seem like he was focusing on it that much at the time. And at the end, he loses Hortense and he tries to shrug it off saying, yeah, I'm totally fine, I don't care about this stuff. Pfft, romance. But we all know that he's lying. You can't hide anything from us, Dan. You're the main character, you don't get to have secrets. Now this last one isn't one that a lot of people talk about, at least that I can see, but it's Dennis. Dennis is this orphan boy who's angry, wants to get revenge, and doesn't get along with others. Sound familiar? Dan ends up taking him in because he sees a lot of himself in little Dennis. And he ends up growing to love and care for him, again, even if he doesn't admit it. In fact, when Dennis gets adopted by this happy-go-lucky, obnoxious hippie family, Dan fights tooth and nail to get him back, even though it doesn't end up working. If he was a full jerk, and I mean like a really nasty person, he wouldn't have these connections at all. He would be purely bad to the bone, unredeemable, and all around obnoxious, but he's not. It's those three aspects that really make Dan as great of a character as he is. Anyone can make a jerk character. Anyone can make a violently, explosively angry character. But it makes a very talented team to make him lovable, and that's what the crew behind Dan vs. did. He's wacky, but also relatable. He's extreme, but not too much to the point where he's alienating. And deep down, he still has a heart. This is why I say that Dan from Dan vs. is the most lovable jerk there is. Well folks, thanks for watching the video. What'd you guys think? What do you like most about Dan? And hey, what's your favorite thing that Dan's ever done? Whether it be emotional or just pure comedy. Comment below and let us know because we're always excited to hear what you guys have to say. By the way, you can see our Patreon executive producer names down at the bottom here. At least, I assume. At the time I'm recording this, we haven't made the end card yet, so I'm just kind of guessing what it's going to look like. So knowing Billy, he's probably going to make some kind of random stuff to make me look like an idiot. Which I'm honestly okay with because that means it's funny, and being funny increases viewership engagement, so I don't really have a problem with that. But if you'd like to donate to our Patreon, there's a link in the description below, as well as the link to our Discord server, Twitter, and subreddit. Thanks for watching, beautiful friends, and I'll see you guys next time! And I actually don't know what next time is, so I'm gonna have to check the schedule, and yeah, I'll see you then.